said it during the last debate, so I'll say it now. I welcome the Minister to her new role. Jane Hunt.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Deputy Speaker. I would like to thank the member for Watford for bringing this important legislation forward. The member for Watford is well known for his hard work, both for his constituents in Watford and also for supporting his colleagues. But now he's able to now transplant and transform the whole of the country, possibly, based on his work. Thank you very much indeed. I'm pleased to confirm that the government will be supporting this bill. Bringing these new rules into force will bring new protections to millions of workers and in industries where tipping is common, such as hospitality. This is especially crucial now as we continue to recover from the pandemic. During the pandemic, members were given quite detailed information about their own constituencies in order to help them during the pandemic. And I was surprised to find there are 3,000 people employed in the hospitality sector in Loughborough alone. That equates to exactly the same number as my biggest employer, so it really was quite a surprise and very interesting. It's good to hear the support in this House for these measures. I would like to take the time to address some of the points raised by honourable members today, but first I will speak a bit more about why the government is supporting this legislation. Many were appalled to hear the stories a few years ago of bosses wrongfully pocketing tips intended for their workers, money left by customers who wanted to recognise the hard work and excellent service they'd received of the staff. That is why my department took action to understand the scale of the problem. We launched a consultation to determine whether previous voluntary guidance in this area was sufficient. We have continued to develop policy positions based on evidence and conversations with stakeholders. The government believes tips should go to the workers who earn them, and that businesses who withhold tips from staff are wrongfully benefiting from money intended for hard-working staff. While many businesses already pass tips on to staff in full, our evidence shows some nefarious practice persists, with businesses deducting up to 10% in some cases. Some have raised with us concerns that they think bad practice has increased since the pandemic. This government is therefore pleased to support these changes through the bill. I will now reiterate some of the key details about what these new rules do and what they don't do. As my honourable friend mentioned, upon passage, these rules will prevent employers from making any deductions when distributing tips, apart from those required or permitted by existing legislation, such as under tax law. We are not making any changes to tax law under these new rules. How tips are treated for purposes of taxes and national insurance contributions depends on whether they are made in cash or by card, and whether they are made directly to the worker or processed by the business or by independent trunk. This will remain the case. Under this bill, anyone who is a worker will benefit from new rights. These rules do not cover those who are self-employed. These rules will apply across sectors, and this is the right across all sectors rather, and this is the right thing to do. But to be clear, businesses who do not normally deal with tips will not be significantly affected by this bill. This is a good opportunity to remind this House that tips already cannot be used to count towards national minimum wage pay. This has been the case since 2009. Yes, of course.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I'm grateful for the Minister for re-emphasising that point. Can she confirm that it's still the Government's intention to pursue rigorously those employers who are still trying to make tips part of the national minimum wage, and that those companies should be named and shamed, as is currently the case?
I thank the honourable member for his question, and yes, that is absolutely the case, yes. I'll now talk about the proposed code. A voluntary code of practice on this topic was published in 2009. Our evidence shows that voluntary guidance alone is not enough to stamp out bad practice. This bill will therefore require employers to have regard to a statutory code of practice. The code will continue to be developed in partnership with key stakeholders and will be subject to a full consultation period before the final version is brought to the House for approval. The code will outline a fair and transparent allocation of tips, as set out in different example scenarios. It is very important that the code continues to be developed with stakeholder input, so we do not inadvertently disallow certain arrangements which are considered fair in some workplaces for the benefit of both businesses and workers. It is important that this code can be updated in the future with the approval of Parliament, but without any primary legislation in order to keep up with changing practices. I'll now address some of the specific points made by colleagues in the debate. And so we had contributions, first of all, from, of course, the member for Watford, and thank you very much indeed again for all that you've done. You raised a matter that I could almost have to declare an interest in, actually, because my husband interrogates the waiters whenever we go out to make sure that they are going to get the tip. It is surprising how many actually say the answer is no. Quite surprising. The member for Kensington clearly showed a good understanding of her businesses and her constituency. She talked about burgers, and I quite agree. It's the service that you pay for in the tip, not the burger itself, absolutely. Each establishment will create its own fare system, you referred to that as well, that is available to everyone working there, so they can include the kitchen staff and cleaners if they wish, absolutely, and they can decide what they want to do, and then that will be followed. And you also referred to consumers. It is also fair to them that they are within my brief too, and so I'd like to be fair to them. And I'd like to also commend her for what she did whilst working in Bays until recently. The member for Broxtowe talked about his experience and examples in restaurants in Broxtowe, and I can speak from experience, the restaurants are very good in Broxtowe indeed. And the member for Hartlepool talked about her great variety of restaurants on the Hartlepool Riviera in her area, and provided such great service to the people of Hartlepool, and again to be commended. The member for Charnwood talked about providing statutory protections and that is currently lacking in this system, and to reward the service given. He referred to being timely and fair, and the word fair comes through again and again in this bill, and he's absolutely spot on. The member for Meriden, thank you very much indeed for your kind words. I thoroughly enjoyed working with you on the APPG. And you talked about a shortage of, he talked about a shortage of workers due to the pandemic, and indeed previous to that. And I'm hoping that this will attract workers to the sector and help it to become a sector where it will form a career where you can get on in life. I'm very happy to meet him to discuss the hospitality sector as he requested. And the Shadow Minister referred to her surprise about some of the businesses, really quite well-known businesses, that have been taking tips. And absolutely, I agree. I'm quite surprised as well. Yes, though, we will always, as Conservatives, support hard work. And I think that's the vein we were talking about more than anything else. The members for East Ham, Watford, Cheadle and Meriden raised concerns about employers using tips to top up low-paid workers. The law is clear. Tips, gratuities and service charges cannot count towards the minimum wage. The bill does not alter this position, and under these proposals, employers cannot use tips to make up national minimum wage pay. And the member for Meriden was absolutely right that we need more workers to get the pay and tips they have earned to help promote employment in the sector, as I referred to before. And actually, there's no need to wait. No need to wait for this bill to come through this sector. Please do put in place your plans well in advance. The member for Watford referred to deductions from tips for card payments and admin fees. To be clear, under this policy, employers must pass on all tips to workers without any deductions other than those required or permitted by existing legislation. For example, normal tax rules will apply. They cannot make any deductions to cover costs of running a business. This includes the cost of processing card transactions or other administrative costs. And also, again, the member for Watford and Meriden referred to the code of practice and clarity around the code of practice. As I mentioned, the statutory code of practice will be published and consulted on before being laid before both Houses of Parliament for approval. The code will be developed through consultation in partnership with stakeholders. We hope to start informal discussions on the draft code later this year, and there will be more formal consultation on a draft after the bill has received royal assent. The code will provide details on when the bill applies, how many employers should distribute tips fairly, trunk arrangements, employers' tipping policies and record keeping. It will also include illustrative scenarios such as sharing out tips between front house and kitchen staff. In conclusion, bringing forward these new rules will protect over 2 million workers from bosses who do not currently do the right thing and give them an avenue to seek remedies. Businesses will be assured that they are not being undercut by companies where bosses are keeping tips for themselves, and consumers will have increased confidence that their tips are going to the workers they actually intended them for. And these new rules are backed by previous government evidence and analysis. The government is therefore pleased to support this private member's bill. Yes, of course.
The Minister for that, and I do congratulate the Honourable Member for Watford for bringing this forward, because it's very important. On a similar plea as one of my colleagues asked for in the previous bill, but will she discuss with the Leader of the House how we can get this legislation through quickly? Because I would certainly like to be on the committee stage if that's possible.
Yes, of course, I will ask about that. There are reasons, such as HMRC reasons and that kind of thing, why it might still be delayed. However, I will do exactly as the Honourable Member has requested. So, it's good to see the support in this House during today's debate. And if you take away, and take away being the operative word, given what we're talking about, if you take away just one word, it's about fairness. I look forward to continuing to work with my honourable friend, dear friend in fact, in charge of this bill, who works tirelessly for the people of Watford and also stakeholders to support the passage of these measures. Thank you.
And the last word, Dean Russell.